Welcome back to Contact. We are joined by Brandon Laird, Associate Head Men's Basketball Coach at Sac State, longtime mentor and friend. Welcome, Brandon. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Coach Climo. You're the man.
So, Brandon, take us through your background as a coach. How did you end up in coaching? What were your first steps? How did you get involved, in landing your first coaching job and then ultimately your first head coaching job and, where you're at now?
Great. Obviously, great question. I have to stop and think. And sometimes I chuckle to myself because coaching was never really something I thought about, especially when I had finished playing. Coaching was never something that was at the forefront of my mind. It was never something that I dreamt about when I was a kid. It was nothing that I even thought about when I played. The story, as you very well know, and I'll share with everyone, is had the great opportunity, and great fortune, and that's just kind of the word I want to use. Is I'm a believer in creating your own luck, but I do believe there are signs and signals that are going to direct you to the path that you need to go in life to fulfill your purpose. And I feel like for me, there have been a lot of bumpers and a lot of signals and signs that have kind of kept me on this path to where I am today. And so it actually starts when I was in high school, El Camino High School, Sacramento, 1996. Was a good high school player, not a great high school player, probably in reality a Division III, Division II type of player. Had no idea what I was doing. I remember, our season was over and my dad said, well, why don't you go talk to the coaches at Sac State? I remember being one of those guys who came and knocked on the door and was bugging the head coach when he was in the middle of doing something. He said, yeah, send me a tape. I made this cool edit and had these highlights and sent it to him. And then 2 weeks later, I remember getting a letter in the mail. It was like a rejection letter. And 18 years old, didn't know any better. Long story short, my dad said, well, let's do the same thing. Go to UC Davis and just go in there and introduce yourself. And I don't remember if you were in the office at the time or not, but I remember same thing. I walked up, my dad drove me down there. Mm-hmm. And we walked up the stairs to Hickey Gym, and I was nervous. And I walked to find the basketball office, and there's 4 coaches in there and 3 players in this tight little office. And here I am knocking on the door and say, hey, looking for a chance to walk on. And I'm glad my dad was with me, because I think this is something that was really important to Coach Williams at the time. Coach Williams, Bob Williams, the head coach, said, I must have caught him at the right time. Son, come in my office. Tell me about yourself. Mm-hmm. And he said, why don't you and your dad come in? And my dad said, no, he's on his own. Mm-hmm. And my dad left and made me go in there by myself. Mm-hmm. And I think that was important, because I think that it showed the coaching staff that this was going to be something that I had to own and something I had to do on my own and something that I had to earn. And then again, fast forward, long story short, Coach Williams gave me an opportunity. He said, hey, come to open gym tomorrow. We have open gym every day. Come tomorrow, try out. Well, I kept coming, and then they couldn't get rid of me. I just kept showing up every single day. And I think there was a persistence and a willingness and a desire to want to be a part of that. And Coach Williams opened a crack in the door, and I did my best to kick it open. Mm-hmm. Made the team, had to try out for the team a couple different times and make the team maybe 2 or 3 times in my career. Ended up being a turning point in my life, and that's why I spent a lot of time on this. Over the 5 years I was there, 4 years as a player, my career record with the group was 97-23. Obviously won the Division II National Championship in 1998. Met incredible friends, incredible mentors, learned how to play basketball, learned how to be part of a championship program. And it really, and I didn't know it at the time, but set the stage for me in terms of my future career. Graduate, ultimately was able to work myself up to team captain my senior year, something I'm really proud of from where I came from. Again, was never a big stat guy. I wasn't a guy who was going to play professionally, but for me, being a team captain meant that I was an extension of the coaching staff. And I think that leadership position ultimately was extremely important to me. And I think for me, validated my work ethic, validated my belief, validated my ability to inspire my peers to try to do the right thing and to play to a standard that had been established. And in a lot of ways, that standard had been passed from the seniors to me. And I felt like as a caretaker of the program, it was now my responsibility to pass that standard on to the younger guys. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, as coaches, that's what we're doing now. Mm-hmm. From there, I graduated, had no idea what I was going to do, no idea whatsoever. I majored in business, dabbled with going to law school, had a summer internship on the floor of the stock exchange in San Francisco. None of that spoke to me. Mm-hmm. None of it spoke to me. I remember you were at El Camino at the time and said, hey, I'll help you out with the teaching and coaching. Why don't you come over here and help out? And again, I think that was a bumper and a sign and good fortune and good grace that this was a green light that I had to follow. And I thank you for that if I haven't done so in the past, Justin, because it really is, an integral piece to where I am today. So started substitute teaching at El Camino High School, started coaching with you. You gave me a ton of freedom to work with the guys. It was awesome. A ton of freedom to speak, which I think was really important for me. By you empowering me, whether you realize this or not, it gave me belief that I could communicate to the guys. It gave me belief that what I was saying resonated. Mm-hmm. And again, I think the more clinics we went to, the more opportunity I had to work with guys in practice, the more opportunities I had to work with you, the more opportunities I had to learn and listen what the coaching profession actually looked like. Mm-hmm. I said, hey, I think I can be pretty good at this, and it's fun. After the first year there, I remember talking with you and saying, hey, I really like this, but I want to see what it's like at the college level. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I went back to UC Davis and kind of asked for a volunteer position just to see what the college level looked like. Did that for a year and really enjoyed. For me, I thought the college level was a better fit than the high school level. Mm-hmm. After being there for a year, I had the opportunity to join Kevin Nosek at Menlo College, which meant me moving out of my comfort zones of Sacramento into a dorm room. Mm-hmm. Even though it was in the Bay Area, but in a dorm room at Menlo College where I knew nobody, was making no money, and it really became like a labor of love. Like, I'm going to kind of just dive into coaching head first here. I'm going all in. I was 23 years old at the time. And I said, I'm going to give myself 10 years to do this. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give myself 10 years to try to make a career out of this. I was 23. Mm-hmm. And Kevin, great friend of mine, again, a former colleague of yours, Kevin Nosek at UC Davis, was my bumper. He was my sign at that point. Mm-hmm. He got the head job. He said, hey, B, I want you to come down as my assistant. We're just going to be a partnership. We're going to do this together. Here's what I can offer you. Went down there, as most young coaches, worked 5 or 6 jobs, continued teaching, ran summer camps, was a counselor for the school, ran PE. I was a dorm counselor. I mean, you name it, 23 years old, working 18 hours a day, trying to make it work. But then again, the big part of it was Kevin gave me a lot of ownership. Mm-hmm. He allowed me to recruit. He allowed me to scout. He allowed me to speak in practice. He allowed me to speak in timeouts during the huddle. He empowered me. And by empowering me, it gave me the opportunity to share my voice. Mm-hmm. And the more I shared my voice and the more in depth I got with this, the more I realized that I felt like I could really connect with the guys, that I could bring them together, that the standards that I learned at UC Davis and the standards that I exemplified as a team captain were the same standards that I was bringing to the programs as a coach. And those standards still worked. Mm-hmm. And the players still respected that. And it was still my job to challenge them to those standards. And so I kept going. 24, 26, 27. I was there 3 years. Kevin left to go back to Davis unexpectedly. So here I was, 27, about to be 28 years old, had been coaching for 4 years now, and had the great fortune of being promoted to the head coach at the time. So I was 27, about to be 28, and I was the head coach of a NAIA program at Menlo College. And we had done a good job of building them up to being one of the better NAIA programs on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. Again, I had the great fortune, and I call it the great sign, that Keith Spataro, who was a mentor and a dear friend of mine, was the athletic director at the time and had enough faith in me to give me that position. Mm-hmm. And that door opened for me. And I think closed door, and I've had a lot of closed doors in my career, and we can talk about that as well. But I've had a lot of open doors, and I've had the good fortune of having doors open for me. And Keith you opened a door for me at El Camino. Kevin opened a door for me at Menlo, and Keith opened the door by promoting me to a head coach. And all of these steps built my confidence and gave me opportunities to build my career. Incredible experience as a head coach. And I know we'll probably talk about this a little bit more in terms of things I learned and things I didn't learn and mistakes I made, but had an awesome 3-year run as the head coach at Menlo College. I think after my 3 years, I was now 30. I was 8 years into my coaching career and made a life decision and a career decision to go a different path. And felt like I'd had the great fortune of being a head coach, but wanted to expand my resume. I wanted to learn. I wanted to grow. I wanted to see what the college, the basketball world looked like at the Division I level. I'm a guy that wants to challenge myself to compete and learn from the best and to try to grow and expand and challenge myself. And again, an opportunity came up at UC Davis. Gary Stewart was the head coach. Kevin Nosek was there. Kevin and Gary opened another door for me. I got my foot in the door at the Division I level. And look, I'm a guy who coached high school, coached NAIA, played D2, and I've coached at the Division I level. And I'm never going to say one's better than the other. I think everybody has a fit. And for me, I was trying to figure out what that fit was. Just like I told you at the high school level, hey, I want to see what the college level is like. When I was at the NAIA level, I said, hey, I want to see what the Division I level is like.
Right.
Had the opportunity to go back to UC Davis, 2 years with Gary Stewart. And then Gary Stewart resigned after I was there for 2 years. Dose of reality. You start talking about, okay, I was 32 at the time and had just gotten out of a relationship, moved back in with my dad. So here I'm a 32-year-old. Essentially had no job, no career at this point. Still trying to figure things out. And so at that point, I realized also kind of the harsh reality of the business, especially at this level, is that things don't last forever. People like change, people want change, and this is a competitive driven industry where the expectations and the standards are you have to be the best of the best on the court and off the court.
Right.
And that's one reason why I wanted to be there. But then the harsh reality of, hey, you need to be able to sustain that to survive. Long story short, Coach Katz calls. Brady Bergeson was here at the time. Brady Bergeson left. I believe he took a Division II job at Western Oregon. Coach Katz said, hey, Brady left. I'm looking for a guy. I had known Coach Katz for a very long time. I had all the respect in the world for Coach Katz. And in a lot of ways, Justin, and you know this was like a dream job for me. I have a lot of pride in Sacramento. I love Sacramento. I tried to go here out of high school. A lot of friends and family in the area. And Coach Katz was in the process of turning this program around. And I wanted to be a part of that. And now here I was at 33. Coach Katz hired me. 10 years later, I'm still here as the associate head coach. And I'm sitting here talking with you. And it's been a great journey since then. So that's my long-winded version of how I got to where I am today. I've had a lot of people open doors for me along the way. I've had a lot of people help me. And I've really had to acknowledge those open doors. And I would also say this, I've had a lot of closed doors along the way. And those closed doors in a lot of ways have helped me as much as the open doors have, if that's something you want to talk about later. Or
No,
if
I want
anybody who's a professional wants to talk about that, because the disappointments and the closed doors help shape you as much as the open doors.
Yeah, I actually want to jump into that right now, which wasn't our plan when we got on. And before I do, a couple things I think I want to highlight there is, how big the coaching tree that we're associated with is, just in regards to the people in our small circle, right? I mean, you mentioned Kevin, right? And then, Diedrich, Yost, Surface, who coached with you and then coached after that, right? Vlasic, Trayvon, all these guys that went through the same program in the same circle are still in the business and giving back and holding those standards that we learned. And, you mentioned empowering or feeling empowered as an assistant coach. And while that was always a major, and still to this day is a major focus of mine, there's also a part of it that is, hey, I don't know how to do this and you can do it better. Like, I'm just going to delegate and filling finding your blind spots, acknowledging them, and finding people that fill those, I think is super important. I want to make sure that came out of, what you were sharing. It wasn't just about us empowering you to do that. It was that, look, Brandon's good at this. Let's let him be great at what he's good at. And then the other thing that I thought, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I think you were the first hire outside of Coach Katz's tree to come in from the outside. And so I'd love to know, what that has been like over the last 10 years and what those closed doors were that helped you shape who you became, the journey you're on, and the choices you've made.
For sure. Well, let's talk about, I'll answer the first one for you. And if anybody knows Coach Katz, the biggest component of Coach Katz's personality, characteristic, and maybe his strength as a coach is the loyalty part. Mm-hmm. He builds a team and builds a program based around loyalty. It's like an inner circle of trust. And what you get from that, and we can talk about team building and culture a little bit later, but what you get from that is a group of guys that believe in each other, believe in the leadership, and believe in the way things are being done. Mm-hmm. And I think for Coach Katz, he has always, in a good way, surrounded himself with people from his culture, people that were loyal to him and people that believed in how he was doing things. Mm-hmm. I was probably one of the first guys, if not the first guy to be brought in who wasn't part of his inner circle at some point. Mm-hmm. And the interviews were interesting, especially I think the other component of this, if anybody is familiar with the Causeway Classic and the UC Davis Sac State rivalry, is Coach Katz was always like, I just don't know if I can hire you because you're a Davis guy.
I remember that. We talked about when you were going through the process and I was in his ear. I'm like, you can't do it. You can't do better than Brandon.
Well, I appreciate that. And the fact that you were in his inner circle, mm-hmm. and the fact that like Coach Williams was in his inner circle, and there was a lot of people within my coaching tree that vouched for me that I think help Coach Katz reckon with it a little bit. And then at the end of the day, Coach Katz is going to make his own decision. And I think I did like 4 or 5 interviews with him at 6 a.m. at Denny's over on Auburn Boulevard, and like in a lot of ways he's testing me, I think. But, tell me why I should hire a Davis guy, tell me why I should hire you. Why should I trust you? In a lot of ways, and we talk about this in recruiting, we want a perfect marriage.
Yeah.
Okay, we want someone who wants to be a part of the program as much as we want them to be a part of the program. You try and meet in the middle. And so I spent a lot of time with Coach talking about, why I wanted to be a part of this program, mm-hmm. born and raised in Sacramento, mm-hmm. How I believed in him,
yep.
How I went to all his coaching clinics and tried to recruit his guys when he was at Delta, and went and watched him practice and did my best to, in some ways, whether he realized it or not, he was a mentor to me before I even met him. Growing up in Northern California and you're coaching in the late 90s, early 2000s, like Coach Katz and those Delta teams, man, like Coach Williams told me, I remember I called Coach Williams. I said, hey, Coach, Coach Katz has this thing open. And he said, B, if you can get that job, you need to take it.
Yep.
Coach Katz is the best practice coach I've ever seen.
100%. I would agree with that.
And it's true. And again, I can talk about what I learned from Coach Katz and all that stuff again, maybe in a separate question. But that process of developing that relationship with Coach was good. And honestly, Justin, like when I got the job, it wasn't over.
Oh no, you're always being tested.
like it's a journey, and it's a good journey.
Yeah.
And you're being tested in good ways every day to make sure that you are all in to Sacramento basketball. Mm-hmm. And that you're a Coach Katz guy.
Yep.
And I think I've certainly developed that mutual respect and appreciation and understanding with him in a lot of ways. Closed doors. When you get into coaching, everybody wants if you have a desire, if you're not sure what you want to do, I think you were a guy, you always wanted to be a high school coach. You knew what you wanted to do. Some people know they want to coach at the junior college, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. If you're not sure what you want to do and you just jump into the coaching world, I think there is this attraction to the fast track of highest level is the best level, highest level is the funnest level. Mm-hmm. Get there as fast as you can. And for me, I would be lying if I didn't say there was part of me that felt like, hey, I want to get to this job as fast as I can, and I want to be this coach, I want to be a head coach at this age, and I want to have everything figured out. Because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I think I was pretty clear about that. Like I didn't even know I wanted to coach. So when I got in, I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. So I won't talk about all the specifics of all the closed doors. Some of them are personal to me,
mm-hmm.
but I could probably count 10 to 12 different jobs that I went for that I didn't get.
Mm-hmm.
Jobs, some of them, I applied for, probably was never a good fit. But some of them I was a really good fit for. Some of them I interviewed for. Some of them I was finalist for.
Mm-hmm.
D2 jobs,
mm-hmm.
director of ops jobs at higher levels,
mm-hmm.
Assistant jobs with other programs.
Mm-hmm.
And every time one of those jobs came up, I talked with my wife about it. You put your heart and soul into it. You go, anytime you're going to go after a job, you got to go all in. And you desire a job. You think it's the right fit. You believe it's the next step in your career development. And then boom, the door closes and you feel like, shoot, I'm stuck here.
Mm-hmm.
Or what am I going to do next?
Mm-hmm.
Or I've been here X number of years and I'm not moving up fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
All of those feelings, which are ego-driven feelings,
mm-hmm.
and are in a lot of ways feelings of insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of ways, I think at first they impact your career in a negative way, but then if you stop and analyze, and for me, I pray about it, I journal about it, I talk to people about it, and I think for me, this is part of my career path of those closed doors were blessings because they kept me right where I needed to be. Yeah. And you may ask this in a minute, but I'll just jump into it now. But I think ultimately when you're in a job and when you're searching for jobs, you want to always be surrounded by great people. You want to be able to have an impact on the people that you work with every day. And you want to have ownership in the program. And for me, like I have all these three things here. And a bonus for me is that I'm living and now raising a family in the city that I want to live in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so silly of me sometimes to think like that I was eager to give those things up to pursue a job that I thought was a better job or a better fit for me. And those closed doors, I think, have kept me right where I needed to be in hindsight.
And I think I've shared this before. We've talked about it jokingly. And this is in one of my go-tos just for my own life and others that I'm advising or mentoring is sometimes our best decisions are made by other people. And that story, fits right into that because all the things you just mentioned at the end are a result of, somebody saying no. And that's a great lesson to take from it. If you can, as you said, get your ego and your insecurity out of the way, recognize that fit matters, that you want to be in a great culture, you want to be around great people, you want to have ownership, and that's not always available at every spot. What I want to follow up with is going back to taking over Menlo and then any other stops along the way where, you have been coached and mentored by some really powerful basketball minds, surrounded for most of your career, with people that empowered you to do a lot. And now you're the head coach and you're ready. And let's jump into this. When the reality hits, what did you still need to learn? What did you finally realize? Like, oh my goodness, this is way more than I thought it was.
Well, I think there's a lot of lessons. I do think I was ready as a leader. I think I had a pretty clear vision of the things that were important to me and what I wanted my team to look like. I think I had the great fortune of already being there 3 years, and I had the great fortune of helping Kevin establish a culture that we both believed in. So it was a pretty natural transition for me in a lot of ways. So I think the transition to being a head coach, I think for me, I knew how I wanted to lead. I knew how I wanted to communicate with the guys. I know what I wanted our team to feel like and act like. I think the big challenge was for me was getting my team to play like that. And I think this is an immaturity on all of us is you don't realize how hard it is. And the beauty and the nature of coaching is trying to align your style of play with your culture.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the challenges I think we all have the first time we become a head coach, and I get this question a lot, people become head coaches and they say, hey, what do I need to be aware of? And I will say, write down everything that you want to do on a piece of paper and cut that in half, and then cut it in half again. You know, I mean, because you will never, ever, ever, ever be able to get to all those great ideas you had as an assistant coach. They'll never work when you become a head coach. Very few of them will. You know, so you got to like almost take everything you want to do and cut it down to a very small bit, and then try to be great in those areas. Right. And I think in the process of doing that, what I learned is that's when you begin to align, you know, your culture and how and what your beliefs are. That then I think you start aligning that with how you play. And for me, I think I had to learn that. And I'll be honest with you, Justin, like I didn't learn that at Menlo. I don't know if I learned that until I got here with Coach Katz. Right. You know, I mean, in terms of developing practice plans and developing a style of play that fits who you are and fits what you believe in. Mm-hmm. And I think when you're a head coach, you have all these grand ideas and you try to be everything to everyone. And at the end of the day, they're great ones. There's great beauty in simplicity. Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways, mastery is simplicity. Yeah. And I've learned over the years that when I was 28 and I was the head coach at Menlo, we did a lot of things really well. We had a great culture. We played our butts off. Great kids on and off the court. But I don't know, like as a basketball coach, I think we won a lot of games on our guts, and we won a lot of games on being connected. But I don't know if we won a lot of games because X's and O's wise, we were out scheming people. You know what I mean?
Yep. And that's the growth, right? And I think you nailed this on the head, where how do you align your style of play with your culture? And then when you reference where you are now with Coach Katz, how do you align it with who you are, right? And what's important to you? And, you know, I think we were together at Davis, and then we were together at El Camino, and you know, me coming in there and trying to apply what we did at Davis, and then growing and figuring out what worked best for me, where now I'm like the polar opposite of what we used to do. And it's figuring out what works for you and what you're comfortable with. And you said it, I think that, you know, great beauty and simplicity, and too much is confusing for the kids, and figuring that out is really important on your journey. And thank you for sharing that lesson. We talked a long time ago, and I stole something from you that we still do to this day in regards to where, you know, our guys hug before practice, after practice. And it was something that I think I even asked you this question, and you're the motivation or inspiration for this question, which is, what's the best thing you do in your program that has had the largest ripple effect? And, you know, that I use that example because I stole it from you and implemented it. And it was huge, especially for young men, learning how to emote, how to be together, how to draw some boundaries around, hey, we're going in here and we're going to battle, and at the end, we're still going to be okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I can point to one specific exercise that we do every day. Mm-hmm. The thing that I would say, and I think this is one of the things I've been able to do as a leader, I come from a very masculine background. You know, I'm one of 4 boys in my family. So, you know, I got 3 brothers. Parents were separated when I was a child. I spent a lot of time my brothers and I living with my dad, and that's not to take away anything from my mom. But when you put 5 alpha males in a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house, it becomes very masculine, you know, and I think a lot of people, again, would jokingly refer to our house like as a frat house. So I grew up in this environment where, you know, I understand the locker room environment. All right. But getting back to the question, I also think one of the things I'm able to do, and one of my strong suits, and something I'm very conscious of, is to try to get young men, and even coaches, even myself, to be vulnerable. Yeah. You cannot be a great team if you're not courageous. And I like everything in life, we steal everything. I stole this from Brene Brown. I don't know if you've heard of her. And if you haven't,
better books.
There's no courage without vulnerability. And you have to be able to create a locker room environment, and you have to be able to create a box where your teams are vulnerable. All right. So exercises that we've done to promote, and when we say vulnerable, guys opening up, sharing their life stories, sharing their fears, sharing their insecurities, sharing the things they're confident about, sharing the things that they love. Right? That's a challenge just for men in general, let alone a group of men in a locker room. But I'm a huge believer in connected teams. And I'm a believer that in order to have connected teams, you have to have courage and vulnerability. And so every day we would start practice with a hug. Circle up, everyone hugs each other.
Yep.
We've even carried it to the point, and this is powerful. A lot of teams will go do their warm-ups, and then they come back in, and you do at like the 4-minute mark, and you do like one more. Hey, here's the starters, here's your guard, and here's your matchups. And you go through the group hug one more time. And to me, I look at it like the Navy SEALs team. Or, I love military. I love elite organizations. But to me, like the Navy SEALs are the elite of the elite. You have to love each other and care for each other more than you care about yourself in order to be successful. And when you start that cycle of hugging each other and saying, I love you, man, let's do this. Or I got your back. Or you're going to be great tonight. And so it goes from a hug to positive affirmations to a belief in each other. Okay, that's one exercise. We started this at Sac State last year, and like everything, I think I stole it from, I believe, Tony Bennett at Virginia, the safe chair, or Dabo Swinney, one of them, where you bring maybe it's once a week throughout the course of the year, or however you structure it, but you bring them up in front of the team and you put a chair there, and it becomes a safe chair. And you allow them to talk about their lives, and you allow the players to ask some questions, but like direct questions. And as a coach, this is where I think you have to probably go first, and you have to open up. And then you have to be able to prompt them with questions that are going to force them to be vulnerable in front of their teammates. Guys will cry. Guys will talk about their pains. And when they're done, you know what happens is guys like give up and hug. They give them up, they hug them and support them. Say, it's all good, man. I got your back. And so what you start doing is I think you start breaking down all those walls that exist between teammates. And you break that wall down, and you start hugging, and you start affirming each other, and you start believing in each other, and you start opening up to each other. And when you start doing that, you know what? Practice becomes a lot easier. Standards become a lot higher. And you have a group of guys that never quit on each other. And you have a group of guys that also will hold each other accountable better. And so, group hugs, the safe chair. I think the art sometimes is finding opportune moments to let guys lead or let guys be vulnerable. And those are the unscripted ones that are probably best. And those, I can't think of a great example off the top of my head. It's one of those things like it just comes to me and, hey, Justin, will you explain to us what happened last night and how you're feeling today? And it could be something very emotional. And I always talk about emotion, but sometimes not emotion. Sometimes it's funny jokes. We have a kid on our team who does juggling. Like getting him up in front of the team and having him juggle makes him vulnerable, as weird as that sounds. You know what I mean?
Well, because you're performing, right? It's a skill you've acquired, and now you're on stage.
So hopefully that answers it.
It's a great answer, Brandon. Thank you for sharing that. I will add, I am very blessed since I got back to Stevenson. The wife of our president is a professional performance coach and has spent a lot of time with me and our basketball team in the last few years, where we will go through some guided training and sit in circle and counsel. If you've ever looked in or had an opportunity to look into counsel, it's a great place to look for some of the things you're doing. And it is designed similarly to get people to be vulnerable and be together. And it's controlled in how you can speak and listen, and super helpful for us and building a foundation where, we lost our best player to injury a couple of years ago, and the day before our first league game in practice. And we were able to sustain because we had built the ligature to handle something like that through our, let's call it our vulnerability work. And it's been really powerful for us. So thank you for getting me on that journey years ago when we talked. And anybody that hasn't tried that yet, I would highly recommend, especially if you're coaching young men, figure out a way to build that in, because it will serve them later in life when their playing careers are over. How has your approach to coaching changed since, whenever that was, 1999, 2000, when you jumped on the floor with me, to now? And if you were starting over today and you got, we got the DeLorean out and had a time machine, what would you do differently?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think and this has been a very small sample size thus far, because my son Nixon is about to be 10 months old. Mm-hmm. But when he was born, there's two things I think about, okay, that have impacted me. The first one was when he was born, I often think about how much I love him, care about him, how patient I have to be with him, and how much guidance he needs. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, somewhere along the line, I realized that everyone that I'm coaching has a father, and I don't need to be their father, but what I'm saying is, how would I want my son to be coached? Mm-hmm. How do I communicate with my son in terms of how patient I am with him, how creative I have to be with him, how energetic I have to be with him in order to guide him and mentor him? And so, again, very small sample size because he's only 10 months old, but I think I think a lot about now how I would want someone to coach Nixon, mm-hmm. and or how I'm raising him, and how I can use those tools and those thoughts to be a better coach with the young man that I'm with every day. Because we're all imperfect, right? And I don't know if you feel this way, so I'm not going to speak for you, but if one of our players are imperfect, we can get irritated really fast. We can get upset. We can react in a negative way. But when one of our children gets upset, we're a little more patient with them, a little bit more understanding with them. We're a little bit more willing to correct them in a different tone or a different capacity, right? So I think about that a lot. The other thing I think about is the relationships that I have with the players that have graduated and moved on. Mm-hmm. And I really cherish those relationships. And you know this as a coach, and I'm sure that everyone you talk to on this podcast will say one of the best things about coaching is the relationships that you have with your players after they leave. And now I think about that. I've been thinking about this for a couple of years. Why can't I have that relationship with them while they're here? Mm-hmm. And how much of a better coach would I be if that trust and that communication and some of those barriers that don't exist when they're not players, if I could have that same type of trust, communication, and lack of barriers when they were players. Mm-hmm. Okay, now I do understand, like, I've been called whimsical in the past, and maybe I'm a little bit whimsical, and that's okay. I do understand I'm a coach. I do understand part of a coach is disciplining and creating a structure and creating standards and holding people accountable to the standards. But I think this goes back to what I said to the last question. If I could, as a leader, create an environment where I truly coach these guys as if they were my own kids, and truly maybe coach them to the point where, that trust and that communication and that empowerment of them in terms of who they are after they graduate existed when they were in the program. I think that would be really powerful. And that's the type of, as a leader, that would be the type of program and the type of trust that I would try to implement.
Yeah. That's a great answer, Brandon. I think what you identified there in speaking to trust and wanting to think about how you interact with them and the way in which your son will be coached at some point, or my children are coached, or when I think, I've coached my kids in multiple sports, some that I never played growing up, which has been very eye-opening for me from a growth standpoint, learning how they operate, how they function, what their learning preferences are, and being able to do exactly what you said, practice patience, right? And I'm sure you'll figure it out as he gets a little older and you're coaching Little League and you're laughing when a kid throws the ball into the bleachers versus how we would respond now. And I shared this with Rich when we talked the other day. I coached the middle school girls team at the same time as I was coaching the high school boys team this year. And I find myself on the sideline for 2 years in a row, actually, laughing and still smiling no matter how ridiculous the play was. And why can't I do that with my high school team? And being able to
Why do you think it is, though?
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you, man. You're on a great flow there, but I think this is a good question. Why can't we do that? I mean, I'm asking you, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are we can.
We all struggle with it, right?
Yeah.
Like competitive urges of, oh, I'm not supposed to laugh, or holding someone accountable, or when you're creating standards, why can't, is there an inability to do both? I know there's a fine line there. I know what we're both talking about, but is there an ability, or why can't we enjoy the process more of coaching in that regard?
Well, here's what I've learned in the last 2 years, and way to flip it on me and make me the person that answers this thing. Well done, Coach. Having a truth teller in your life is important. Having somebody that's watching you and giving you that feedback is important, and reminding you of your behaviors. And you can do it. And I had to remind myself and be very intentional that, our team is fragile, and I need to be the positive one. I can't be the negative one. They're already hard enough on themselves. And that's a growth point. I'm 45, I'm 25 years into this thing. And I didn't know that when I was 23 and Bax hired me to be the head coach. I had no idea. And I still don't. And I'm aware of that. But what I think you talked about was the art of the relationship. And I'm very blessed to work at a school where we wear multiple hats. So I teach, I coach, I'm the administrator, I have advisees, I work in the dorms. And so what we call that in the independent school world is, how many points of contact do you have with these kids? And I think at your level, finding those points of contact, it has to be intentional. It's hard. It doesn't just naturally occur because you're there to coach basketball and grow young men of character. And how do you build trust without knowing all the other things that are going on with them? And so I would offer that back to you as, to your point of developing trust. And that's done outside of the 2-hour practice window.
Well, I think, you hit it right on the head. I think points of contact is good. I'm actually I'm going to write that down. I think that is one of the challenges at this level, is it does become more of a transactional relationship where you're at practice for 2.5 hours, you're done. Or, it's films, it's practice, it's weights. They have their own academic advisors. Mm-hmm. They have their own strength and conditioning coach. Mm-hmm. Your points of contact are limited, and a lot of times the points of contact become in practice in a locker room. And I think we do have to be intentional about creating other points of contact, outside of that, to develop those relationships. And like I said, I think you hit it right on the head. I don't think I can say it any better or add anything more to that.
So I'm going to wrap up with this. And I didn't plan for this, but it's something that, again, it came up casually in what your tree looks like. And, there's some consistency in that with me because, we come from the same place. We've been mentored by the same coaches. Coach Katz was very influential in my high school coaching career. Coach Williams got me into this and showed me kind of the way, and Fogues and all of our people, right? And Tress and those guys. But if you had to think about, the people that you've been able to work under, and what, if you can even identify a singular specific takeaway from each of those relationships, or a handful that you would offer as, Climb, if you had given this to me when I came in the door at El Camino the first time, this would have been very helpful on my journey.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we all know it doesn't work like that, right? So I think that's why it is a journey, and that's why it is a process. And I think, to answer your question, some people have one mentor in their life mm-hmm. that they could probably answer that question. Mm-hmm. Some people may have two mentors that, hey, Coach Parcells taught me this, and Coach Belichick taught me this is the Belichick way, and it's the only way I know how to do things. Coach Parcells, he taught me this, and it's the Parcells way. He's my mentor, and it's the only way I know how to do things. I think for me, I've always probably been a little bit more independent and probably a little bit more stubborn. And I don't know if it's a good way or a bad way, maybe a little bit more arrogant about trying to formulate my own thoughts and my own opinions while using the relationships and the mentors I've had. And so I think about this a lot, because I think one of the questions we always talk about is what's one of the challenges you have when you take over a program or when you become a head coach? Well, I think one of the challenges the biggest challenge you have is trying to take all those different ideas that other people have formulated and use them as your own. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And I think that's where a lot of coaches get in trouble. Well, so-and-so does it this way, is how I'm going to do it. Well, this is the way I learned, so this is how I'm going to do it. Where at the end of the day, I think successful coaches take those experiences and then put their own twist and their own belief system into it. So I'm going to answer your question. I think there's a quote that I think about a lot when I'm trying to answer this question, is that we stand on the shoulders of giants. And I've had a lot of giants on my journey. I think it goes back to my parents in terms of how I was raised. Very, 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 and I think about that a lot. Very influential in terms of who I am today, in terms of my personality. And then I go to a lot of the teachers I've had. 7th, 8th grade. Quick story, and I don't want to digress.
Time. That's great.
Have you ever heard the name Rocky Rothschiller from Arden Middle School?
I have not.
Okay. Awesome. 7th grade biology or zoology teacher, science, whatever it was at the time. He, unique guy. I won't get into it. Anyone who knows him's awesome. Ask some of the people in the San Juan district. I remember, this stuck with me. He would give a test, like maybe the first week of school. And it'd be like all this information that you didn't know that he was going to teach you ultimately. And everyone would get the test and be all flustered. It'd take you 30 minutes. I don't know how to do this. I don't know this answer. And you turn it in. And then after he collected all of them, he would say, so Justin, you failed. Brandon, you failed. Tim, you passed. And I was like, how did Tim pass? Well, the first line on the test was, if you read this line correctly, and it was like a paragraph long. And in one of the paragraphs, or maybe it was the first sentence or in the middle, it's like, if you are reading this, you do not have to do the test. Okay, what it was learn how to read everything and follow directions. And most people don't follow directions, don't lead. There's no attention to detail. Okay, so I digress a minute. But I would say there's parents in my life, there's teachers in my life, but then in the basketball world, Coach Williams at Davis, who created this family tree, the 1998, the entire program, but the 98 experience of what we did at Davis with that group of men and how Coach led that group, I think has been immeasurable in terms of who I am and what my belief system is, in terms of forming when you have a group of young men that care about each other, that believe in each other, that stay unified in a mission and have a competitive pride together, you can do almost anything. I truly believe that, whether it's an organization, a team, a sport, truly believe that. I think Coach Williams was able to clearly build that for me. I think, you, Justin, your passion, your skill development, I think for me, when I look back and I look at how passionate you were about the skill development and how much you learned and how you brought that to practice every day, is something that sticks with me. That's why I called you this summer and said, hey, we're doing some skill development stuff. Give me what you got. Those things still stick with me. Kevin, the organization of the program from top to bottom, how you build life skills outside of it and how those things correlate. Kevin Nosek, I take that with me. Gary Stewart, how to run a Division I program from a professional standpoint. How do you network in this business? How do you present yourself? Why is it important to look, dress, speak a certain way? Why is it important to present your recruiting presentation this way? How do you recruit at this level? How do you build those relationships at this level? How do you become a Division I professional? How do you make this your profession? How do you move from a job to a profession? Gary was incredible with that. Incredible. And then when I got here to Sac State, with Coach Katzen, we talked about this, the practice planning, the attention to detail, thinking about every subtle nuance of every second of the game and being prepared for it. So for me, along my journey, and when I have the opportunity to become a head coach again, I take all of these things and I try to put them into my head and then speak from my heart how I feel about it. Mm-hmm. So instead of trying to do what you did, mm-hmm. taking your drill and then just putting my twist into it, mm-hmm. or taking how Gary recruited, taking that philosophy and theory, but putting my own ideals into it.
Yeah.
Right. Taking Brian's practice planning, his attention to detail, and putting my own blueprint on it. Mm-hmm. So we all stand on the shoulders of giants. Nothing I've said today I think is unique or original. But I think it's a culmination of all my experiences. It's a culmination of everybody who has been a point of contact on my journey. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, just trying to learn and absorb and think about those things. You know, I don't know if you do this, but I have like a bucket. Mm-hmm. All right. And in that bucket is all of the El Camino practice plans from 2002 and 2003. It's all the skills and drills from the 4-out 1-in offense. Mm-hmm. It's still, I'll think of something, I'll go into that bucket and I'll pull it out. Mm-hmm. You know, all of our practice plans from Davis, or something Kevin did when we took the team to Yosemite. You know, how did we organize that? What was the notes? You know, and so I pick and pull all these things. I'll pick up the phone or text Coach Williams.
Right.
Coach, I'm struggling with this. What are your thoughts? Obviously have the blessing to be around Brian, Coach Katz every day. Mm-hmm. And pick those brains. And so that all goes into that bucket. Yeah. And then I go into that bucket sometimes and I pick and pull what I want. And when I have some free time, what I also do, and that's what I encourage everyone to do, is I also use that bucket. That, you know, with that bucket though, it gets smaller and smaller every year because I start creating my own bucket of my own philosophy, my own beliefs. Yeah. When I'm a head coach, this will be my core values. These will be how I want to coach offense, how I want to coach defense, but they're all shaped from this other bucket. So ultimately, at some point, while that bucket will always be there, I want my own bucket as well.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I still have binders that I copied from Coach Williams' shelf while I was at Davis of Don Meyer stuff, just clinics he had been to. And I've had these things forever. And I'm at the point now where I'm trying to give them away to my coaching colleagues that are, you know, still trying to find things and growing. And it's like, here, do you want this? Like, I've digitized what I need and I've adopted what I'm going to. It's a hilarious story. I lied that was going to be the last question because I thought of something else. And you are, I think, uniquely positioned to answer it based on your career path, in that you have worked for multiple people as an assistant and associate head coach now. How do you best play that role, make suggestions, share ideas, when often I've described being an assistant as you need to learn how to get told no 99 times and still make the 100th suggestion? How do you have an impact? How do you share? How do you keep the mission and vision of the program at the forefront of your mind while trying to enhance and bring ideas?
Great question. And I'll be honest, I think it's something that is still a work in progress for me. You know, and in a lot of ways, we talk about the open doors and closed doors. I'm a big believer that you should master a job or try to learn everything about a job before you're ready to move to the next job. And I'm still working at this job. Mm-hmm. You know, I still got a lot to learn. Working for Coach Katz is challenging in a very good way. Mm-hmm. And I think to answer that is the first thing I would say is you have to know when to lead and you have to know when to follow. Okay, you have to know when it's time to get behind coach. Well, you're always behind coach 100%, but you also have to know when it's time to maybe give him a differing viewpoint. You also have to know when it's time to just back off and say, that's not a battle I'm going to win, and all you're doing is creating additional stress and problems for the head coach. You have to be ultra prepared. Okay. So Coach Katz draws up all of our practice plans, but when he gives me prior to, if it's a Sunday and we're practicing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and he's working on practice plans on Sunday, I may send him a list of things offensively, defensively, or personnel notes that I see that I think are important.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the end of the day, he can do what he wants with those. He can throw it away. He can say, hey, I agree with this offensively. Let's work on this Monday. Or I agree with this defensively. We'll work on it Tuesday. Or Brandon, none of this is relevant. We're doing this. And so I think, in this position, you have to know when to lead and when to follow. You have to be super prepared, because I think you have to have the forethought to think as a head coach. And you have to be able to present that information to the head coach in a manner that he may or may, the manner that he's receptive to. And if he takes it and doesn't take it, you have to get your ego out of it. You know what I mean? And then I think the third thing, and this is the balance, and this is something that I've talked about as well, though, and this is why I enjoy the job so much, and the respect level I have for Coach is that he's given me ownership. He's empowered me, and I take that very seriously. And this references back to what we talked about, is that it took me 3 years, 2.5, 3 years to really learn what Coach Capps wanted, to learn what he believed in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then it became my job to try to align everything in the program to that vision.
Right.
Not my vision,
right.
His vision.
Right.
But within that, once you get comfortable with aligning Coach's vision and you're working towards that every day, how can you bring your own personality into that? Yeah. How can you bring your own thoughts, your own stories? Hey, Coach, I know we've been running our shell drill like this every day, but I remember, can we use this tweak?
Mm-hmm.
So we're not changing the structure of the drill, but maybe you're tweaking it with a suggestion that you believe will work. All right. This is very important. Anytime you're going to bring something to a head coach, you better have some valid support of why it's important. And you better believe in it. Don't just throw ideas at a head coach because you want to throw ideas at him. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to really firmly believe it, have video evidence, mm-hmm. have statistical evidence, mm-hmm. have testimonials, and make sure that those points fit with the alignment of ultimately what the coach would believe in. There's no reason to try to change the alignment or the vision of how he wants to play, but how can you add to that? So I think hopefully that answer, I think those 3 things are really important. Again, know when to lead, know when to follow, mm-hmm. be super prepared, think in advance, be a troubleshooter in advance. And then again, I think, the third thing is using your personality within his vision and trying to blend the 2 of them together. And the fourth thing I would say, and I don't know if this goes without saying, but the more that I can take off of his desk and the more that I can do so that he can focus on the players, he can focus on the practice planning, and he can focus on recruiting, and he can focus just on the overall management of the program, and he's not worrying about all these other things. And I think that's huge.
That's great advice, Brandon. Thank you. And I think that's a great way to wrap up. We'll definitely need to come back for volume 2, and we can dive into some of these other things that came up. But as far as the design of what we're trying to do here and offer advice and information, really, that people can do what they want with about your journey and what you've learned. Great episode. Appreciate having you. Thank you for taking the time. Look forward to seeing you soon in person, and stay safe.
Absolutely. Thanks, Justin. I appreciate it.